Welcome to Mission Majjhima, Ajahn.
Ajahn.
Ajahn, so tell us about Majjhima number 90, the Kaṇṇakatthala Sutta.
So this is the last sutta in the Rajavagga, the chapter on kings, which many of which circle around this fascinating relationship between King Pasenadi and the Buddha. There's also this subplot with King Pasenadi's son, Prince Vidudubha, who it is said after King Pasenadi's death actually massacred the Buddha's whole clan, the Sakyan clan. As mentioned last sutta, that seems to be largely commentarial, and yet in this sutta, we actually see some interesting points that give some validity to Prince Vidudubha as an ill-starred prince with some resentment. It begins with the King Pasenadi asking some of his ministers to go pay respects in his name to the Buddha. And then he's having breakfast with his wives, and they ask that when he goes and pays respects, that he convey their respect as well to the Buddha. He then goes to the Buddha with his entourage, and you can just tell this is actually at the very beginning of their relationship, when King Pasenadi's still skeptical and still weighing out, and much of this sutta is based on this, the Buddha's dispensation versus the Brahminical framework which he was given as a king. And this has been previously indicated in other suttas by King Pasenadi embarking in a large sacrifice with the Brahmins, etc. He was, it seemed, pulled between these belief systems, at least at first. So he basically first asks if the Buddha indeed has said one thing he's heard reported, that it is possible for someone to know and see all things at all times, complete omniscience. The Buddha says, no, it's not possible for one to see and know all things at all times, although he does say it is possible for one to know and see a single thing at a certain time, but not complete omniscience at all moments. And King Pasenadi asks Prince Vidudubha, who he'd heard this from, where he'd heard, and he references a brahmin in the court who's summoned. But in the meantime, they embark on a very interesting dialogue where King Pasenadi begins weighing these Brahmanical beliefs about caste, with the Buddha asking, is there a difference between these four castes that were extant in ancient India? And the Buddha is it's interesting, if you read carefully how he answers the questions, he's delicate in how he answers. He's not too confrontational, but basically in the end, after some questioning, he raises 5 qualities, factors of effort, which are key and which actually distinguish individuals, namely one's faith, one's honesty, health, one's energy, and one's wisdom. And it's important to see that these 5 factors are something we can all cultivate, at least as much as our health will allow, but that they aren't these very far away things. We can all be honest. We can all try to protect our health. We can all be cultivate a measure of faith. And the Buddha says these are what actually distinguish individuals. And then uses a brilliant simile first of trained and untrained elephants and horses and the difference between those. And then one with the different, when King Pasenadi pushes farther and says, is there any difference between different castes who cultivate these? The Buddha says, just as wood used, like a wood drill, used to light fire, or a flame come from wood, would produce the same radiance and the same heat. Even so, if these factors are cultivated in any individual, basically the liberation of mind that is resultant is the same, which is a beautiful simile. I love that. And then they kind of push farther where this can be a bit confusing at first, but King Pasenadi basically asks something akin to, are the gods, is Brahma eternal? Which is somewhat motioning to these Brahminical beliefs. And the Buddha, after kind of clarifying King Pasenadi's question, says that if they are defiled, that they'll return to this rebirth or return to earth. But referencing a certain class of gods who are somewhat enlightened, the non-returners, he says those gods will not return. Then there's a fascinating exchange between Venerable Ananda, who we learn King Pasenadi doesn't know the name of, so this indicates this is at the beginning of their relationship. He has a question and back and forth with Prince Vidudaba, who has a fascinating question which indicates some of his resentment of, can a defiled god bring down an undefiled god, which foreshadows the commentarial stories of him later usurping the kingdom from his father. And the Buddha says no, they're out of the kind of dominion. Finally, the minister who Prince Vidudaba said had spread this rumor comes. We learned that actually he didn't spread the rumor, it was Prince Vidudaba himself foreshadowing. And the sutta ends with actually King Pasenadi gaining a measure of faith, part of King Pasenadi's long path towards faith. And once again, the Kosala Samyutta Nikaya, chapter number 3, goes into many suttas with King Pasenadi and the Buddha, which are brilliant and a fascinating relationship. So, Ajahn, what would you draw out of this discourse?
I think it's very interesting that in the background of this whole sutta, we've got this drama playing out of King Pasenadi of Kosala and all the intrigue in his palace. And we've got these characters who are just so tertiarily mentioned, like Somā and Sakulā, and the man who is, kind of going back and forth between the Buddha and King Pasenadi's son, Vidudaba, and Sanjaya of the court. And there's this back and forth and lack of honesty and kind of, talk back and forth. And it's just such a different scene when King Pasenadi actually comes and speaks to the Buddha, and that all of that is so much in the background, and it's not within the suttas themselves, just not given that much attention at all. That's kind of, most of us are just so involved with the stories and the drama of what's on the TV, these huge, great men, quote unquote, of history. Whereas here, the Buddha is teaching the Dhamma, and that's what's foregrounded given the vast majority of the sutta, and the rest is just bit players, bit parts. Some of the other suttas in the Rajavagga, this chapter on kings, these 10 past suttas, have been talking about omniscience, and Bhante Nalio wrote a great essay. There's another essay by Naughton, who mentions, I think, a great analogy that omniscience, in a Buddhist sense, can kind of be understood less as one knowing everything, but omni as in omnivore. So an omnivore doesn't eat everything all at once, but just can eat, meat and vegetables. So similarly, the Buddha is saying, omniscience, sabanyuta, is not the capacity to know everything everywhere all at once, not simultaneously, but if someone averts their mind to that, then they can know. And noticeably, the Buddha doesn't actually say, and I have that capacity. This question of omniscience will become huge in the history of Buddhism with later strata of texts, including Mahayana sutras, very much taking that the Buddha was omniscient, could know everything, even to the extent of saying that his eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body could know everything anywhere all at once. But that's definitely not gone into in the Pali Suttas. For me, I think the heart of this sutta is, what I find most interesting are those 5 factors for striving. The first of them is framed as Tathagata Bodhi Saddha, which is faith in the awakening of the Buddha. That's one foundation of faith in Buddhism. And how that's framed is the quote which many of you will know, that Itipiso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho. He is the Blessed One, the Noble One, the perfectly enlightened one. This stock phrase that we do in our chanting, our recitations at the end of the year 108 times. So that's faith. And then for health, it's framed in a really interesting way. And this is a pericope, which we find other places, is that one is free from illness and affliction, possessing a good digestion that is neither too cold nor too warm, but medium and able to bear the strain of striving. The third factor is that one is honest and sincere. The Pali is asato amayavi, and the commentaries define one of these as being one is not like a eelfish, where when they look at you, it looks like a fish, but then they turn to the side and it's like, it's actually an eel. So basically this two-facedness. And that's kind of like what Viduddhabba is doing. Either Viduddhabba probably or Sanjayi are just lying. They're two-faced in this thing. So things are not going to work out for them well. And we find the Buddha actually saying that it's not just matters of spiritual success that these 5 factors play into, but any type of success. Like if one wanted to be an elephant trainer, you have to have these 5 bases for striving. The 4th one is being able to put forth effort in abandoning the unwholesome, cultivating the wholesome. And the 5th factor is that wisdom, specifically the wisdom that sees the arising and passing away of things. And it's just fascinating that that would be foregrounded, that, the Buddha's awakening isn't super mystical. It's just the capacity to see the truth of the impermanence of things. So I just love those 5 factors, and nothing mystical about these, very down to earth, and not just ensuring success on a spiritual level, but in any endeavor. John, what is the word of the week?
The word of the week is virya. I am really surprised we haven't done this one yet. It means effort. It comes from the root vir, which means to be heroic, which I love the connotations of. The Buddha actually classified his teaching as a viryavada, a teaching of effort in some cases. So skillful effort is key to the path.
All right. Well, let's all put forth a lot of good effort this coming week, and we'll see you over on Zoom in just a moment, or see you next week for Majjhima number 91. Ajahn.
Ajahn.